3, 2, 1. Da, 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 da. Hi, Euclidean Vision here. Welcome to the second video in this series on how to fix the Overwatch lore, exploring what I feel are its 4 core problems. If you've come here for my previous video, welcome. If you haven't, watch that after this, it's probably more interesting, but also, welcome. Right, there's going to be less fucking around in this video. I want to jump into things as soon as possible. My main purpose here today is to illustrate what I feel are the core problems affecting the Overwatch story, explain why I feel as such, but also try to figure out why they exist and discuss to what extent they each affect the story. So, as previously discussed in said other video, the 4 main problems I feel Overwatch suffers from are as follows. A lack of clear and present chronology, a lack of progression and resolution, the multimedia implementation, and unreliability and implicative storytelling. So, for now, that's just a bunch of big words. Let's jump into these. Most any story needs a sense of time, with events playing out in sequence, their consequences affecting further actions, and so on and so forth. Now, while the Overwatch universe has a relatively extensive history, not to say anything about its depth or lack thereof, one of the most common complaints about the Overwatch lore is the lack of events occurring in the present day. The Overwatch team has stated many times that they have much more to show us from the past than the present, and this can be a massive concern for any story. Focusing too much on the past lowers their opportunities of actually progressing the universe and its characters and, telling stories that affect any actual growth or change. Not that we shouldn't be showing the past, and not that the past can't affect the present or tell a meaningful story in its own right, but concentrating efforts too much in this area removes any sense of momentum from a story. And when Overwatch's release schedule has been as variable and disparate as it has, maintaining narrative momentum should probably be a bit higher up their list of priorities. So we're still stuck at the point of recall, the defining present moment that the game was launched on, 2 years down the line with very little evidence as to the core concept's progression, and therefore very little development or progression for our characters. Overwatch isn't much of a story without Overwatch, and developing such is integral to actually moving the story forward beyond just the foundation for a game, if that is still a possibility, or even if that's just the intended outcome. Showing us the past is evidently important, though, for both the Overwatch team to tell their story and for us to understand it all. But would it not be better if we kept seeing these things as they actually became relevant in the emerging story, as with, say, Honor and Glory or Rise and Shine? Rather than just as a collection of backstories that you can know, but it doesn't affect anything. A clear sense of time and its passage within the universe would be useful for both sides here, giving the writing team and the fans a stable base of information to realise the world from, and understand how each character's motivations and actions fit into the narrative at that given time, the time that we're actually invested in now. Speaking of motivations and actions, these are the greatest tools through which to tell a story and affect progress. When Reyes shot Antonio, we gained a wealth of potential ideas as to who his character really is and what actually motivates him, both in the moment and in the present day. Sadly, this doesn't actually bring about any progress, it doesn't actually resolve anything, and it doesn't actually move us forward. It's a great piece of storytelling in a very interesting situation, don't get me wrong, but it serves to the narrative as a whole either doesn't exist, won't for a very long time, or just sort of backs up what we already knew, that he's dissatisfied with Overwatch and the way it does what it does. Instead, learning this history in direct relation to specific actions taken in the present day, showing both those actions and the prior ones in a new light, would have definitively served both Reaper's character progression as an individual and the Diegesis' plot progression as a whole in a more concrete and resolute manner. Now, for the IP in its current state, maintaining balance of their character's status is very understandable. They want fans to be comfortable in the characters they've come to know and understand, at least for their most core characteristics. It also helps for purposes of keeping the game stable alongside the lore. It can, however, prove as a hindrance to the media set in the present that they have actually released. While Zarya's Searching comic has great character progression for Zarya, it doesn't have very strong plot progression for her. As a concession, whoever wrote Link 17, give them a raise. Seriously, give that person a raise. Mwah, more, please. Sorry, I had to go off on a bit of a tangent there. I'm a big Lynx fan. While Zarya comes to somewhat relax her attitudes towards Omnix due to the events of searching, as well as realizing the people and institutions that she admires are not exactly what she thought them to be, she completes her hero's journey by going back to the very thing she was doing before the story thread started, which is part of the hero's journey, but back to the Russian front, fighting Omnix for the institutions and people she admired. And so she goes back unchanged. That's where she breaks from the hero's journey. Which again, doesn't, as that would probably evidence, doesn't move us forward, it stagnates us instead. Even current voice lines highlighting her struggle would help this story out progress, but alas.
Katya is a hero to my people.
Although this does make sense for her character arc this early in the story's production, theoretically, as affecting such a huge shift in her attitude so quickly would remove further possibilities for growth and therefore storylines. It could also dissociate fans from the character. It could even be seen as unnaturalistic, even quite cliched if she would just give up all her prior biases at the drop of a hat, based on experiences with one Omnic, albeit, a kick-ass, sassy Omnic. So here we get to see an overall problem with the Overwatch lore, in that it needs regular sequential events to occur in the present in order to affect any real change without it feeling engineered. Sadly, at this point, lore is irregular and doesn't emerge often in any significant manner, to say the least. Easter eggs hinting at new plot threads aren't often worth a whole lot compared to comics or animated shorts that actually develop existing ones. Which brings me to the point I feel is the least problematic of the four, in that while it is still kind of a problem, it's actually just fucking cool. The experimentation shown by the creators of Blizzard is astounding. I have nothing but praise for the way they've implemented telling the story of a universe through so many different styles of media. The way that the comics, shorts, maps, voice lines, skins, events, sprays, news articles, and even tweets from the staff all intertwine to let us realise the world of Overwatch is a genuinely awesome experience that shows some really extensive thought has been put into how they tell their story, most of the time. This also provides a multitude of ways for fans to interact with the universe as well, from engaging in it as little to as much as you would like, to using media formats that certain fans find more appealing. For instance, I'm a comic nerd. Some people love hunting through maps. Whatever floats your hoverboat, Overwatch likely has it. The fact they've often connected multiple media sources to single storylines, such as the Volskaya map leading to the Infiltration short, to then the Searching comic, or how Retribution starts with a comic into an in-game cinematic and then the actual event itself. All these things promote getting more people into these various formats and into the story as a whole. So, can't fault that. That's a really clever idea. Sadly, though, this fragmented form of storytelling is kind of the problem, at least for those who are looking for a consistent present narrative. With time so displaced, and events not genuinely affecting the storyline at this point, this methodology of using multiple media sources to outline small aspects of narrative does work in providing plenty of speculative material to keep people interested, while letting you slowly unveil the overall story without inciting any massive incident. But the more story threads that we have, the less we learn about each one, and each one in turn is less likely to be concluded sufficiently or in a timely manner. This, again, as I said, you'll hear this phrase from me a bit, is a problem for those seeking a consistent present narrative. For the story to genuinely move forward in a determinate and focused way, I feel it would largely have to be told through a singular medium, so as to cement a certain canon for the Overwatch story as it goes forward. The almighty Jeff has commented on this about keeping the game separate from the canon, at least in regards to killing off a character, which, by the way, guys, you're going to need to tell a lot more story and get us more invested in more characters before you get anywhere close to being able to do that. But I feel that is a sensible outlook to possibly to at least apply to that part of the story, but you could even apply it to the story as a whole, whereby the game is as removed from the present-day story of Overwatch as possible, so that the game can maintain stability and balance on its own terms, while freeing the narrative canon to go and do whatever it wants. This does, have its own problems with reliability and canonicity, and the sort of disconnect between the game and the lore, so it's hard to say it's the best idea, but I think it would at least, like I say, make everything more regular and consistent and present. Which leads me to my final problem, one I feel is more of an actual problem. When a lot of Overwatch's story is being told through tiny pieces of information, and sometimes even through just inference, We, the community, end up being the ones designing the story, given us how we often have the starting clues for a story, or several, but nothing more. The so-called magic of Overwatch. Never mind the supposed prevalence of the unreliable narrator, which is, a useful tool to use sparingly and in the right situations, but in Overwatch's case has almost become unreliable narrative, when we have limited information with which to deduce our feelings about the narrative presented. Creates an even further disconnect when you become aware of the duplicity of many of the lore bits we do have through the nature of their writing. Never mind when we're just flat out told what we're seeing is unreliable in the first place. Yeah, this is designed to foster intrigue, and it would suck if they just spoon-fed us everything. But more often than not, this leads to confusion, an overabundance of headcanon, and therefore more fans to please or upset with whatever you do, and personally sometimes just a lack of investment. It can be kind of hard to care about something at times if I don't know whether it's the truth or not, especially when that's not the point. In a serious adult political drama, or something of the like, that would be like a driving force of the forward-moving plot. But with Overwatch, it just sort of muddies the already stagnant, murky waters. I appreciate Blizzard's drive to give each of their characters depth and nuance, but that shouldn't be compromised by making the actual proceedings or facts unclear. The nature of Overwatch's story almost demands that the information we have is reliable and clear, so that we can actually all have some common understanding of the story. So to compound quite a few of the problems I've raised so far, possibly what I feel is the worst part of it all, but that's my opinion, is the issue of conflicting information or inconsistent characteristics. For instance, McCree in the Retribution comic and McCree in the Retribution event are two completely different characters. I will say no more on that because we'll be here for hours. Fight me. Okay, to stay on Retribution a little and maybe go back to someone I mentioned a little earlier. If Reyes had been Reaper for several years before the Retribution incident, something else hinted at quite strongly but not wholly confirmed, and look at all the mess it makes, because his actions in Retribution were kind of robbed of some serious emotional weight, because he's already been doing this for years. It means we're not really seeing an active change in motivation from Reyes, or that he could not feel any genuine emotion behind his choice. He's already been working in the shadows in Blackwatch and as Reaper, theoretically, to clean up the world, so how is this decision even a big deal to him? And therefore, why should it be a big deal to us? Why is our inciting incident not really anything of the sort when you look at it in a certain way? Even if it was just, say, a Talon plan to bring down Overwatch, the emotional weight delivered in the comic and event would just be missing then, and the uncertain nature of Reyes' motivations would have been given to us as a puzzle to decipher for naught beyond what we already knew. Many of the character interactions in-game also feel completely uncertain or unreliable, as they often contradict otherwise previously given knowledge, such as Genji's struggle with the nature of what he is. As this is such a core component of his character, the wildly varying nature of his interactions with the world and the people around him would suggest he truly isn't at peace with himself, something that in itself is also supposedly core to his character and the story of at least two other characters. If this is the story thread they're trying to build on, awesome, nice, I like what you're doing, but the longer something like this hangs in stasis and uncertainty, the longer it looks less like clever characterization and development of plot, and more just like an inconsistency. Other times, the interactions make little sense having even occurred. Here's a few little examples for you. Why does Xenia know that Torbjorn has taken in an Omnic? It's not something that Torbjorn or anyone else would be spouting about. For that matter, why is Torbjorn heard shooing away the very same Omnic that he is willingly taking care of? When and why did Doomfist arrange to see Symmetra's work? And how is she okay with that? I mean, is she? How does Hanzo know about Junkrat's treasure? Why does anyone know about Junkrat's special treasure beyond the people in Australia? It wouldn't really mean much to any of them. May is currently in Nepal, so hasn't spoken to anyone face to face. Maybe Zenyatta or Genji, maybe. But so how does she even have interactions with any other character? Have some of these people ever even actually met? This logic applies to so many of the interactions given in-game that I feel several, possibly most all of them, make a lot more sense as being what the characters would say to each other if and when they are to meet and when they actually logically know about each other and things about each other. Then there's some things that just make no sense at all. Why was Mercy a family friend of the Lindholms at 14? Why are Brigitta's nieces and nephews at Christmas with their grandparents and their aunt, but not their own damn parents? Why did Horizon Lunar Colony introduce Specimen 8 some 10 to 15 years after Specimen 28? That's pretty crap science, guys. Why do we have several character interactions that discuss working together between people who just wouldn't work together? How canonical are the missions that we play through? Spoiler, they're not. And that's kind of infuriating. It makes sense for what they're doing with the game, but it creates such a huge disconnect with the story that they're trying to tell that all of this adds to the lack of sense of time and space and causality that makes the Overwatch story difficult to decipher. It can even widen the disconnect between the game and the lore, whereby the information we have is sparse, shallow, and conflicts with itself logically to a point where you can't even say certain things are given facts about certain characters. I mean, never mind the retcons, but I do mind the retcons and the manner in which they were implemented, thank you very much. I do understand that the story has changed drastically over the years behind the scenes, what with new writers, cancelled huge pieces of backstory, which, if you were to show us them and just say that it's not canon, we'd be okay, it would be at least something. But a consistent story and a focused narrative is almost the minimum bar you should be reaching in order to tell a good story. Never mind taking responsibility for that story. So, the problems that I've discussed here, as I've outlined, are not all exactly problems, especially as they're inherent to the method Blizzard is implementing to tell their story. The story isn't exactly the main focus of the project, and may have just been enough initially to facilitate the game, and that was thought to be enough. It could have been designed so in order to gauge audience reaction and allow itself the ability to grow more emergently or not in response to people's demand or lack of for it. The time and cost that would have to be put into constantly updating the game to fit the current lore would be a huge burden to place on the team. Never mind creating a single-player game where the lore is the game. So the staggered release of lore should be beneficial to them so as not to lose assets in any aspect, or so as to create, tension and intrigue to increase the lifespan of the game and the story itself. Never mind if they want to focus all their storytelling into the lore events, which, would be awesome in some aspects, but again, like a single-player game, would determinately induce a natural delay in progress, a single one per year, maybe, and incur huge costs to Blizzard in both time and money spent on such. So in some ways, these are all more so features of the method rather than problems with it. It depends on what Blizzard sort of intended to do compared to what we see of them doing. But of course, these features, if we wish to move forward, do bring obstacles with them. Moving forward, either despite them or utilising them will be difficult. We shouldn't expect Overwatch to be told in the same way if we want it to progress forward at a decent rate in a substantial manner. But it is entirely up to Blizzard to decide how best they feel they can tell their story. Maybe moving forward at this point would, actually do more harm than good in the grand scheme of things. Who knows? Comparing Overwatch to Blizzard's other IPs, the story is more focused on individuals and smaller scale events, rather than, say, interactions between international or even interplanetary factions and gargantuan numbers of people, orcs, zergs, whatever. This does mean that a delay in pacing or a lack of temporal clarity is much more noticeable in something like Overwatch, and so it should be approached in a different, I think, more direct manner. While Overwatch is still technically quite early in its lifespan, the pace of lore that has been set thus far, along with the nature of the story they're trying to tell, means that it at least feels that there should be more, despite how young the story is at this point. So there, yeah, exactly, with what I just said, we're getting into much more subjective territory. You might feel there is more than enough for the point that we're at, and I can't exactly argue on that. At least I hope now you can understand why I feel these problems are as such, how they can be seen to be part of Blizzard's method, and to what degree they can affect the nature of the Overwatch story and how it's told. I also hope this has given you some ideas on how we could correct these things, or even strengthen any existing elements that you enjoy that you think are actually worth holding on to. So for some further ideas from different perspectives, because, I can't be right about everything. I mean, I'd like to be, but I can't be. I would highly recommend Hame's recent video on the pace of Overwatch's lore releases, and TB Skyen's design analysis of Hammond. Both give some very well-informed and interesting speculation into the future of Overwatch as a whole. And for a more general view on how story can affect a game, to maybe gain more of an idea of why all this matters, to some of us at least, check Extra Credits' video on the pillars of game writing, and Strummerdude or Matt or whatever's video on why plot actually matters to games. And of course, above all, as I haven't taken nearly enough of your time yet, I recommend you now go and watch the video that this one stemmed from, entitled How to Fix the Overwatch Lore. Everything I address here I've sort of expanded upon in that. Shameless self-promo complete. Okay, actually, after that, if I've got my arse in gear, you can go watch my next video, analysing the Overwatch organisation and the members of the cast I feel will be joining in the near future. All available links below. Shameless self-promo actually over. So, we made it. Thanks again for listening to me waffle on for probably far too long, but be warned, I'm really looking forward to waffling more in the next one. I've been Euclidean Vision, and remember, if you ever think that all these theatrics have been a waste of our time, hope you're wrong. I think that was way cooler than the last one. Bye!